All right, so what I did was I took the lasso and I lassoed around the house parts with a lot of overlap. And then I hit Command J to duplicate it. And then I'm just going to turn off the layer by clicking on the eyeball next to it underneath. Okay, for the bent tree, I can do that same thing. I have it roughly sized to what I want. And this is where your tablet can really help. And now I'm going to use the lasso tool and just roughly cut around it. Mostly I'm trying to get rid of hard edges. But I'm not trying to do a refined cutout of the tree yet. And there's a few ways. So for instance, instead of just selecting around the tree where I want the tree, here I've selected what I don't want. If I need to alter the selection, I can hold Option down. It'll get a little minus sign next to the lasso tool, and that way I can subtract from the selection. And if I want to add something to the selection, like this empty space back here, if I know I don't want that, I can hold down Shift and it will add to the selection. And now I'm going to say select inverse, and it will select everything that I didn't lasso. And now I'm going to hit Command J to duplicate that onto a new layer. And then I turn off the smart layer behind. So then I'm going to move this off to the side. I have 2 elements out of 6 that I sketched for this. And now I'm quickly going to move those others in. Okay? In order to do that, it can be frustrating, but we want to have access to all of our files, right? So you have kind of multiple things open. I have a sketch open in preview. I want to have my assignment 1 folder open with my references so I can drag and drop them in. So what's number 3? Number 3 is this driftwood here. So I drag and drop it in. It's almost already the perfect size, but now I want to cut it around. Are you allowed to have figures in your fantasy landscape? No. No, because it makes it not look like it's timeless, right? So I'm going to go ahead and cut them out just loosely. It's good to have lots of overlap. And if I hit delete now, it won't let me because it's a smart object. And I say don't delete. Instead, select the inverse and duplicate it. And then turn off the background layer because you might want that smart layer later. And then move it out of the way. Okay, next I have this tree line one, which is for my middle ground. Here's my tree line reference. And this actually stretches kind of organically across the middle. And you see, so I'm actually intentionally distorting it a little bit. And you can easily intentionally distort organic stuff. That becomes a lot harder with man-made stuff. And I might as well just leave that whole thing in, even though there's a helicopter there that obviously I'm not going to use. But I don't need to really cut this one out as much. But I can loosely erase around trees. So the shortcut for it is Command right bracket to move layers up. Command left bracket moves them down. Or you can just grab the layer and click and drag and move them up and down. So select inverse and duplicate with Command J. And I'll kind of move that off to the side. Okay, what's next? The World War II ruins, which I love, but they weren't the greatest quality. They were very grainy, so that's why I've tucked them into the background here. They're at about the perfect size. So again, I don't need very much of them, but I want a lot of this overlap, but I don't want the people, right? So maybe grab it kind of like that, duplicate it, Command J, turn off the layer. Move it off to the side. And don't worry, if you move it off to the side and it goes off the edge, all that information is still there in Photoshop. And then lastly, I have 5, but I did 6 in my sketch. So my last one is this Misty Mountains reference for my foggy sky in the background. It's a nice big reference layer. And if you're going to use one image that kind of fills everything, it's good if it's a far background layer. like the sky. And maybe just for, in the interest of transforming it and making my own, I might flip it horizontally. And I might stretch it a little bit. But I'm just going to go ahead and rasterize that just as it is. Okay, so now, how can I make this work? Well, it's going to be just like our cartoon shape or our shape exercise. The first job is to move all these things together so that they fill up the white space of my sketch. But right now I can't see my sketch. So what I'm going to do is make a duplicate of my sketch with Command J. Then I'm going to move that up with Command right bracket all the way to the top. Then I'm going to make it a low opacity of only around 30%. And I'm going to lock it. Okay? I'm going, just like we did with our shape exercise that we just finished last class, I'm going to use the Move tool with Auto Select Layer. And I'm going to work from the background up. So I'm going to start with my Misty Mountains. And I'm going to place it within my sketch. And if I need to move things out of the way, I can. And you see how my sketch just kind of floats on top. I can transform. I can warp. Kind of push these trees where I want them.
So that's what you do before you cut out stuff?
This is with my cutouts. It's just because this background layer, I work from the background now forward. Because this background layer is just for the mist and the tree line, I'm using all of it. I'm not cutting out any, because all of this is going to get overlapped with other layers. You were asking about foreground like mountains, though. Well, you'll see. You can do anything you want, but you want it to be based on your own sketch. So I'm going to put the house now here, right? And the ruins now back here. And if they're not showing up, you want to move them up through your layers. Right? And is it going to match your sketch exactly? Well, probably not. And that's just fine. But your sketch is kind of your indication for what you were thinking. So I think maybe there is a good place. Oh, I do like the rubble, so maybe I'll push it a little
So
further.
if I'm just using the sky for one picture, that's my background layer?
Yep, absolutely. Now the driftwood, I need to move up to the top of the layers, but still underneath my sketch, right? Driftwood goes there. My tree line here, it needs to go up through the layers until it's kind of tucked in there, right? And now my bent tree needs to go up through the layers. Like this. All right, now I can turn off the sketch transparency that's locked at the top. And I can see, okay, now these are all of my references that I sketched, kind of put together. Now, it's helpful to know where the edges of your composition are. So you have that with your sketch, right? But now we're going to use our rulers and our Move tool, and we're going to draw guides that will help frame our image. So what you do to draw guides is you click on the ruler, either the vertical or the horizontal ruler with the Move tool, and you drag down. So I'm going to drag down a guide for the bottom. I'm going to drag a guide for the sides. And you can change this because your sketch is just a start. And now I'm going to turn off that sketch layer. Might make mine a little taller. Okay? And now I see with my guides, this is what I've got. These are my elements. And now I have to go to I've successfully killed the white of the sketch. Now I have to work on the transitions between. Okay? So I'm going to work from the background to the foreground. So I'm going to turn off those layers. And the first thing I'm going to do is work with the transition of this element to this element. So how do I do that? Don't worry about color yet. Don't worry about lighting yet. Worry about edges. This is where your tablet can be helpful, and this is where a good understanding of the magic wand tool can be helpful. So this sky is all very similar. So I'm going to turn on contiguous for my magic wand. I'm going to use the default tolerance of 32, and I'm going to click on the blue of the sky. But I have to be in the right layer. Okay? And then it gets almost all of it, but then I'm going to hold down Shift to add to my selection. And I will add this blue. And I will add this blue. And I will add this little window of blue. Okay? And then I will hit delete. Or I can zoom in and see. But that's making a pretty accurate selection. Now, too accurate or too severe here, because these bricks were blue enough that they would be deleted too if I hit delete, right? So before I hit delete, I'm going to switch to the lasso tool. I'm going to hold down Option to subtract from my selection. And you add to a selection by holding down Shift. You subtract from a selection by holding down Option. I can add these little blips to my selection so that those get deleted. And because it's a grainy photo, it's good that it's in the background, but also it's going to kind of make this selection a little bit trickier, right? It's going to cut in a little too much. But luckily they're ruins, and ruins aren't perfectly clean anyway. I can add this little blip using the magic wand, holding down Shift. This little bit of blue, I can add that in, and all of this will be deleted. So check your edges. It's all about edges. Now this is a lot easier to cut out than later on when I'm going to be cutting out like individual vines around that bent tree. So do the easy stuff first.
So if the picture is like really pixelated, does that mean it's not good quality?
Yes. So you want to try to use something else if you can. And that's when you do the image search, Google image search, limit the size of your references to 10 megapixels or bigger, but then you have to say view each image because sometimes it is really bad big photos. Well, then maybe it is fine. You have to press enter if you're transforming it or moving it before it will be fully resolved. Because otherwise it's just showing you a preview image while you're still transforming. Okay, so this looks pretty good. So when I hit delete, do you guys all know what's going to happen? Yeah, it's like a fine scissors now, or like an X-Acto knife to the magazine. And then I can hit Command D, and you can see there's still debris here, but it's not going to be that noticeable. Now, it gave me this little halo. Do you see that? Of pixels? So if I want to get rid of that, what I can do is I can select now the empty space with the magic wand. And that's because it's selected exactly at the pixel border. And then I can go to Refine Edge under my select options. And these are the settings I almost always use for Refine Edge. This is a way of softening edges. Come on, load up. I shift the edge by about 10% positive. I smooth the edge by 5 steps, and I keep it at a radius of less than 10 pixels. So you can see in the preview that it's going to just soften and feather that edge a little bit. And I have it set to remember my settings. So when I say OK, it takes a little processing time for this, but it will make my selection soft-edged instead of hard-edged. And it will grow the selection to kind of envelop and affect that little blue halo. You guys see that? And now when I hit delete, it will soften that. And I can keep hitting delete, and it will soften it more and more until I'm happier with it.